I'm joined now by All Rise News' Adam Klasfeld. Adam, we have an update from court where it seems like a judge is finally fully fed up with this administration. Can you explain what just happened?
This is a monumental ruling, Brian, and it's a monument to Lindsay Halligan's failure. This is a ruling where a federal judge has decided to disclose the grand jury proceedings in the case against James Comey to the defense. Now, that on its own seems like a fairly incremental ruling, but what went behind it, what he revealed about what went into Comey's indictment is jaw-dropping. The judge found 11 different bases on which to question the conduct of the grand jury proceedings. He said that Lindsay Halligan fundamentally misstated the law, and that's a direct quote, 2 times to the grand jury in jaw-dropping ways. I'll get into that in a moment. He said that the basis, a central basis of the evidence used to indict James Comey came from searches that may have violated the Fourth Amendment, that may have impinged upon attorney-client privilege. He essentially said that he could not trust the statement that Lindsay Halligan said about an explanation about a more than 2-hour gap in the grand jury transcript, questioning it in various different ways. And I'm going to just read a couple of parts of the decision that show just how disastrous this is for the Trump DOJ in a case that was ratified by the Attorney General Pam Bondi. This is how Lindsay Halligan told the grand jury, how she instructed the grand jury. We don't know the exact quote, but the judge said that whatever she said, quote, is a fundamental and highly prejudicial misstatement of law that suggests to the grand jury that Mr. Comey does not have a Fifth Amendment right to not to testify at trial. The prosecutor's statement ignores the foundational rule of law that if Mr. Comey exercised his right not to testify, the jury could draw no negative inference from that decision. So this is a first misstatement of law. She botched burden of proof. That's a first misstatement of law when a grand juror asked her a question that she had to resolve. She botched a thing that anyone who has seen a courtroom drama or seen a criminal trial knows. The second one is almost even more jaw-dropping. It says here that this second statement, clearly suggested to the grand jury that they did not have to rely only on the record before them to determine probable cause, but could be assured the government had more evidence, perhaps better evidence, that would be presented at trial. So she apparently, we don't know the exact.
I mean, if a prosecutor could say that, then everybody would be indicted for everything, because they're saying you don't have to just look at the evidence that we're presenting right now. Just rest assured that we really have some damaging smoking guns against these people, and so you might want to hand over the indictment.
It's farcical. It's beyond parody. I doubt my cousin Vinny would have made such a statement before a grand jury. I doubt that Legally Blonde. I mean, Hollywood has not come up with a bigger flub of the law. Now, we have to take a step back here. Of course, this was Lindsay Halligan's first time in a grand jury room. We're now getting our first glimpse of what happened in the grand jury room. And the more that we learn, the more incredible it is. We found out from this ruling, again, it affirmed she was the only person in the grand jury room as a prosecutor for the government. There was one witness. It was an FBI agent whose the central basis of the testimony may have been evidence that was improperly obtained under the Fourth Amendment, that they were using an old warrant under an investigation for different offenses for a different purpose. I think the phrase general warrant was used one time to describe the sort of rummaging through potentially confidential attorney-client communications between James Comey and his then legal advisor at the FBI. That evidence, according to this ruling, formed the core of the presentation to the grand jury. And if we take a step back even further, remember, the grand jury voted by a very narrow margin. I believe it was just maybe 1 or 2 votes away from there being no indictment. And they rejected the first count altogether. And they did so with multiple misstatements of basic law and the core of the evidence potentially being improperly obtained, and with Halligan assuring the grand jury, just imagine we have better evidence than you've seen right now. And under that instruction, with no defense presentation, they barely got it across the finish line. That's probably why the judge said at the end of this ruling that it may justify the dismissal of 1 or more of the counts in a 2-count indictment. So there are many ways now that James Comey's defense has these grand jury materials that they can use to torpedo this indictment, and who knows what's next for Halligan on this very ugly record.
So that's what I want to talk about. Where does this indictment itself stand as it relates to James Comey? If the judge finds here that the indictment was passed on misguided or baseless grounds, is the judge able to unilaterally revoke the indictment of James Comey, to throw it away?
He says in this ruling that he could dismiss the indictment based on any of the grounds that he identifies in this ruling, that there are irregularities in the grand jury proceedings that could justify the dismissal of the indictment. And last week, Brian, I was on the ground in Alexandria, Virginia, where James Comey was challenging the indictment on a different ground, which was Lindsay Halligan's appointment, arguing in essence that she is unlawfully acting as an interim United States attorney, that she was actually a private citizen when she entered that grand jury room, telling grand jurors that she was a valid interim United States attorney, and that on those grounds, the case against him should be dismissed. A judge in that case, when I was watching that hearing, the judge remarked from the bench that she will have a ruling on that application by Thanksgiving, and she seemed very receptive from what I saw in that courtroom to the idea that the case could be dismissed with prejudice because of the unlawful appointment of Lindsay Halligan, who was the second interim United States attorney in a row because Trump pressured out the last guy, Eric Siebert, a respected interim United States attorney who had the approval of both parties but wouldn't do the thing that Donald Trump wanted him to do. He's gone. He's replaced by Lindsay Halligan. So the case can absolutely be dismissed on that ground. It could be dismissed because of the defects in the grand jury proceedings, multiple defects, 11 to put a point on that this particular judge identified. It could go away on those grounds. Another thing worth mentioning, it came up during that hearing, was that there was a gap, an apparent gap, that from 4:28 p.m. on the day of Comey's indictment, in the grand jury transcript, no court reporter was present between that time and 6:40 p.m. when an indictment was returned. Lindsay Halligan said in a declaration that was when the grand jury was deliberating. A federal judge, the magistrate here, U.S. Magistrate Judge William Fitzpatrick, questioned that account multiple times here. He said it doesn't add up because of, you may remember, there was a first failed attempt to have a indictment on the first count. So the government brought back a second indictment, which had the 2 charges that the grand jury went ahead of. So the government doesn't buy Lindsay Halligan's declaration to the court and completely undercut the grand jury proceedings that form the basis of James Comey's indictment, which is why I describe this as so monumental.
So if I'm not mistaken, there are 2 separate tracks, concurrent tracks, that could lead to the demise of this case. One is the lies that Lindsay Halligan has told, or the improper way that she's comported herself, that may lead to the judge just dismissing this indictment, but also the concurrent track that shows that Lindsay Halligan is improperly put into this position, and so all of the indictments that she made could be dismissed with prejudice because she shouldn't have been there in the first place. Is that correct?
That is correct. Now, with the disqualification motion, that was brought to the court by both James Comey and Letitia James, and both of them are asking for dismissal with prejudice. The reason that's happening on a separate track is that for now, Lindsay Halligan is acting as a top prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia. So to avoid a conflict of interest, they needed to bring a judge from out of the district, and they brought a Judge Cameron Curry from South Carolina. So she's presiding over that separately. The magistrate who issued today's decision, Judge Fitzpatrick, on Wednesday will be considering another wave of pretrial motions. That can include the vindictive and selective prosecutions. That could include a motion by James Comey saying that what he said in his 2020 testimony was literally true, and that it should be dismissed on that ground. It should also be dismissed, he argues, because Ted Cruz, if you look at his questions during the relevant passage of congressional testimony that this is all about, Ted Cruz's questions are all over the place. And Comey argues that creates a fundamental ambiguity that should be another reason to dismiss this indictment. There are many seemingly very, very viable ways that this ends against James Comey without a trial.
And finally, Adam, let's end off with this. Why would the administration continue to use Lindsay Halligan knowing that her indictments may all be dismissed with prejudice because of her improper appointment to her position?
I think the easiest answer to that one, Brian, is no one else would do it. This is why Eric Siebert was pressured out.
Yeah.
This is why the advice of every career prosecutor in that office was ignored. It's why even to this day, when I go down on Wednesday to Alexandria, Virginia to watch this, there will not be a single prosecutor from the Eastern District of Virginia arguing for the government. There will be Lindsay Halligan, and there will be 2 out-of-district assistant U.S. attorneys who they had to find out of district to endorse this case. And it appears to be imploding at this moment in spectacular fashion.
We'll leave it there. For anybody who's watching right now, if you'd like to support the work that Adam is doing at All Rise News, this is true independent media. I'm going to put the link to All Rise News right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. If you are not yet subscribed, please do yourself a favor if you want to stay on top of any of this stuff and subscribe. Not only get a great resource, but also support independent media more broadly. Adam, thanks as always for your time.
Always a pleasure, Brian.